Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to continue our conversation about the trigonometry ratio. And today's topic is going to be the last part of this unit. Some of you might be very surprised. It's just like we just started unit. How come this is already finished? As I mentioned, this is actually a very short unit. We focus on only one thing, trigonometry ratio. And today, let's talk about another example using trigonometry ratio to solve some application problems. So first, let's see one scenario. As we mentioned before, trigonometry ratio, what we are working on this unit is always on the right triangle. And before, we always using the angle and also a certain ratio to find the side. So now the question will be, what if sometimes we don't have angle? Instead, we do have sides of the triangle and we want to find a certain angle. Then how do we do this kind of thing? So how do we find the angle? How do we use up, like what we saw here? What if I want to know the angle? I don't know how many degrees here, then how do I find it? Still, we are still using ratio, trigonometry ratio to work on this problem. But by solving this, we do need a little bit extra step, which we'll be showing today. So let's check the first example. Very first thing, let's see, we do have a right triangle here, triangle ABC, and as you saw here, we have one side labeled 14, the other one labeled as 10, and the question is asking us to find the angle A. So angle A is the one we need to work on, so let's label this one as X. And also, just want to remind you, always pay special attention to what do we need to round it up, which this case is tenths of degree. So the keyword is tenths. So now you can think about how many digits after the decimal point we need to keep. So this is actually the steps, and as you can see, the steps here is very similar to the one we did before. The very first thing is always label three sides. And remember, this time we don't have angle, but we do need to focus on, you can say fixed angle, which is the angle we need to find. So this time we are going to use the angle we need to find to label all three sides. Always go across the angle, arrow here from the angle we need to work on, which is opposite. And the longest one, or the one cross 90 degree, is going to be hypotenuse, and left part is adjacent. Next part, what are the two sides we know the length of? So only two sides are labeled with length, which is A and H. Remember, this is not really talking about exactly number, is we need to use the one we label to answer the question. And remember, trigonometry ratio we have in this unit is SOHCAHTOA. So as you can see here, only, yes, you are right, only has A and H. So that's why we are going to choose, C stands for cosine. So now let's write down the equation. So as we mentioned, and I wanted to remind you again, the rate meaning the definition of cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Do not write down something like that. Okay, that's something weird. This is not the full name of the cosine ratio. So now let's write down. So cosine, and always follow the angle. Angle is one we don't know, so we're going to keep like this way. And is adjacent, which is 10 over 14. Now, question is, how do we solve it? Some student might say, is that cosine times x, so we need to divide by cosine for both sides? There's no such thing for that. So in order to solve this one, we are going to use one thing called cosine inverse. What does that mean? So in order to solve this is actually, have to be related to inverse function, but it's not really focused today. So please remember, when we find an angle, we need to use something inverse. So x is actually equals to, we are going to keep the ratio and we are going to use this symbol. This one is called cosine inverse. That's a little -1 in the exponent part called cosine inverse, and we just need to put the ratio here. So now, calculator time. There's no way we can use mental math to solve this, but keep in mind this is cosine inverse 10 over 14. So let's just use online calculator, quick one. As I mentioned many times before, please do remember the very first thing, set up the degree, and then we just type whatever we mentioned about cosine inverse here. So when we look for the cosine inverse, we need to use INV. So is INV. So as you can see, once you click INV, everything for whatever we saw before, sine, cosine, tangent, becomes that little -1, meaning cosine inverse. So we go click cosine inverse, 10 divided by 14. So some students might wonder, what is ARC COS, meaning arc cosine? This is another way to write cosine inverse. So, but remember, the same as cosine inverse, enter, that's our angle. So as you can see, it's 44,415. So it seems long, 44.415. Double check. Did I use degree? Yes, degree is chosen. And also we click inverse. You can see arc cosine here is actually cosine inverse. So now we have this. Go back to check, how do I round, which is nearest 10th. Nearest tenths, meaning only keep this number. Next number is 4. So that's, the next number is 1. We are not going to round it up. So this is 44.4 degrees. Remember, that's our unit for the angle. So one thing, actually two things, let's write it down as a note to remind that the very first thing, always choose degree. And second, to find angle, we use inverse. So it really depends on, sorry for my handwriting, it really depends on which one you are using. If I using sine ratio, it's sine inverse, cosine, cosine inverse, tangent, tangent inverse. We use inverse to find the angle. Okay, so let's work on the very last example of today's lesson. This one is going to be a application problem. Let's read the, sometimes reading application problem is kind of confusing because probably you get stuck for certain words which is actually not related to the the question to solve at all. So try to be patient about this process. If you do not understand certain words, you can definitely use some resources to help you to find it. But focus on the most important part, that the key information in this one. So it's something we need to build up. And also we mentioned this is 1 inch of vertical rise, which is the one label in the right triangle here. And also this part is 12 inches horizontally, so this ramp is designed this way. And we need to find angle of inclination. So if you do not understand this word, if you see the the picture label here, this is actually the angle we need to work on, which is this X label in this tiny angle here. And we need to round it to the nearest 100. So it's very clearly we need to find the angle in a right triangle. So very similar as we mentioned before. First, let's label 3 sides. This is one we need to work on. Even this is tiny in front of this O, and this is across 90 degree here is H. Very hard to say, but this is the rest part is A. So labeling is finished. And then do we know opposite, which is 1, and we know adjacent, which is 12. So as we mentioned, the SOHCAHTOA, and now we have O and A. As you can see, only tangent. So the ratio is going to be tangent, because tangent has the definition related to opposite and adjacent. Now let's write down the equation. So it's tangent, the name of the ratio, follow the angle, is opposite over adjacent is 1 over 12. So now we have this. All we need to do, okay, since we need to find the angle, it's going to be tangent inverse 1 over 12. Let's double check everything here. 1 inch over 12 inches is this angle. Now let's use calculator. So let's clear everything here and always double check, do I have degree here? Yes, we do, and we need to use inverse. And this time, as we mentioned, is tangent inverse. So click tangent inverse. Again, do not be confused on this way, same as tangent inverse here is 1 divided by 12, close parenthesis, equal. So as you can see, this number is quite small. As you can see indicated on the picture is actually small angles here, small angle there. So let's write down 4.7636. I just sometimes write down the number longer, so it's same that way, but this says to the nearest hundreds. Hundreds meaning 2-digit after the decimal point, and next number is 3. Nothing we can do. We're going to get rid of this, so the final answer is going to be 4.76 degree. So that's going to be our final answer here. So as you can see, really very similar to the process we had before. All we need to do, the only one part we need to remind ourselves is the inverse part we are going to use. So this is actually the final. And also I wanted to remind you again, whenever you do this, do not forget to set up the degree part, and also to find the angle is going to be using inverse, which all you need to do, click that inverse here, and you will see the inverse for this three function here. Okay, so that's it. That's how do we use exactly same thing, trigonometry ratio, to find the angle. Definitely check these examples. If you want to take notes, just rewatch the video or draw something in your notebook to label down these steps here. I hope this video is helpful, and thank you so much for watching this video, study this topic with me. Take care everyone, see you soon.